Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Before we get started today, I want to let you guys know that this episode is brought to you by the online course, Creating a Meaningful Life. Now, this course is the culmination of 20 years of work and research by my personal mentor and university professor, Linda Levine, and myself. Now, in it, we teach not only the skills and strategies that we've used and taught and which are being used by life coaches all over the world to create a life of fulfillment and balance, but we also go into how you can design your lifestyle, how you can improve in every aspect, all 8 of the aspects that make a complete and rich life. And really, we share a lot of our wisdom. So if you've been inspired by the show, by some of the guests on here who seem to have these incredibly rich, fulfilling lives, I do encourage you to check it out. And of course, it is backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. So to take advantage of a special coupon for listeners of this podcast, visit jle.vi/meaning. All right, here we go with the show. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's show. Before we get started, I want to read you guys an awesome review from Mr. Paul Souf from the United States of America. He says, "Great podcast for high performers. Jonathan has done an excellent job expanding from his super learner courses to this podcast that expands to all areas of high performance. If you like Tim Ferriss's podcast, this is also a must listen." Paul, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be compared to one of my top role models, and I really appreciate it. So for everyone else out there listening, please take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. I can't tell you guys how much it brightens our day and helps us get the absolute best guests for you guys. On to today's show. My guest today is an Indian-American author known for the 3 best-selling novels that he has written, 2 of which are being turned into movies as we speak. However, those novels are not why he's joining us today. In fact, my guest is actually here to tell us about the incredible journey that he embarked on just a few years ago after attaining his success. It was a journey, you guys, of spiritual awakening, of detachment from the world, and really of self-discovery. In May 2016, which should be, if you're listening to this episode hot off the press, right around now, he will actually be publishing his 3rd novel, The Yoga of Max's Discontent, all over the world. And it's actually inspired by this spiritual sabbatical. Now, I have yet to read it, but the Daily Telegraph has called it, quote, "the greatest adventure of our generation," end quote. And the Wall Street Journal is saying, quote, "this book can change your life." So some really, really big words from some really credible sources, you guys. My goal for this episode really was to help discover how my guest went from being stuck in a rut and feeling just a little bit too comfortable to traveling across the world, discovering meditation, and how he used a year away from work to actually advance his career and himself, and all the while find greater satisfaction in his life. So throughout the episode, we talk about the idea of using a sabbatical or a year off to find purpose and meaning in your life. We talk about the power of meditation and how to go about achieving it. We even talk about the virtues of practicing poverty and much, much more. I have to tell you guys, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I really enjoyed talking to someone who actually is a fan of the show. I took a ton away and a lot of meaningful life tips, and I just know that you will as well. And so now, without any further ado, let me present to you Mr. Karan Bajaj. Karan, welcome to the show, my friend. I am so happy to have you, not least because I understand that you're actually a fan of the show.
Indeed, Jonathan. Thank you for inviting me. And yes, I've been loving all the recent episodes. Thank you for pushing my thinking on a lot of different areas.
Wow, I was so touched to receive your email and just to hear, that you've been tuning in and stuff like that. It's pretty great, pretty exciting. So we're very excited to have you here today.
Likewise.
So Karan, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey. I know you're a very well-respected novelist. I'm sure our audience is wondering a little bit how we're going to make the transition from novelist to superhuman. So tell us a bit about that and your background.
Sure, absolutely. I'll do that. So as a novelist, I've written 3 books in India in the last 7 or 8 years, all of them which have done pretty well.
Congratulations.
And then in parallel, I've also had a corporate career in the US predominantly. So I've worked with companies like Procter & Gamble and the Boston Consulting Group, and I'm now the chief marketing officer of a startup based in Brooklyn.
Very cool.
I kind of say that because for a long time, I took a lot of pride in this idea that I was balancing my writing with my corporate job and doing pretty well in both. But part of the journey that led to this latest novel and the sabbatical that we'll talk a little bit about was I just kind of reached this conclusion that to truly be able to write words that kind of resonate in eternity, to truly be excellent, I have to kind of dive deeper into just like focusing for a period of time only on writing with greatness, and like just tapping into something deeper than myself to be able to write truly excellent stuff. So I think that was part of the seed that led to the sabbatical.
Very cool. So tell us a little bit about this sabbatical and what it was, what it meant, and what it gave to you.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, the seed was a very tangible goal that I wanted to write. But then there was something happening in parallel, which is my mother kind of like died from cancer. She was very young. She was at age 55 around the same time that I was thinking about taking this time to write. And I had a little bit of an intangible goal linked to my spiritual tradition, if you will. Like, I'm from India, so I do yoga and meditation. But I had this very intangible kind of a goal that I wanted to get a very clear insight into the nature of reality. It sounds very lofty, but it was like I need to know why life, death, suffering and stuff happens. So I just wanted to know it in a very visceral way. And I think the combination of these two things led to I have to take a year off to just tap into something deeper than myself. And that led to this journey. And in essence, there were 3 components of the sabbatical. We spent 4 months going from Europe to India by road, then 4 months doing yoga and meditation in the Himalayas, and then like 4 more months of kind of our own personal silent retreat, if you will. So my wife and I, we did 3 components of the year. That was the idea.
Incredible. And so if I understand correctly, really you were looking for what does it all mean and how do I find my place in this life? Despite the tremendous success that you had before, you were looking for something a little bit more meaningful.
Exactly. And then part of the way we planned the journey was also very linked to that. Like, so as I said, the first part was Europe to India by road. The idea there was this idea of conscious goallessness, because a lot of my life has been very driven by goals and achievements and left-brained analysis on everything. And I wanted to, as I said, I wanted to tap into something deeper. And for 4 months, the idea was that we won't even plan a single day. So we booked, like the day before we left for the whole year, we just booked the cheapest flight to Europe, which was Scotland, due to whatever reason. And we landed in Scotland and we had no idea at all about how the next 4 months would unfold. And we would just let every day just decide based on gut and intuition what to do next. It sounds kind of romantic, but it was very hard for me because I'm very used to planning, right? And I want to just let go of all planning completely.
Wow.
So it ended up with very funny choices. Like we spent just 1 day in Italy, which is like, should have been Italy. So you should spend a lot of time in Italy. But we spent 1 day in Italy and 3 weeks in Bulgaria because that's just how the road led us. So it was just very conscious to let go of all goals. So that conscious goallessness was one aspect of the sabbatical.
I recognize a lot of the tenets of meditation here, where it's just a matter of being present in the moment, not thinking about the future, and really experiencing things to their fullest, which I think you can't do if you're seeking a goal and nothing else.
Absolutely. I think that's very true. So that was part reason why we made that choice. And then the second choice in the sabbatical, again, we kind of defined a little bit of a principles rather than the activities. The second principle was exactly linked to what you said, which was what we said was complete silence. And what silence meant for me was just like there is obviously the chaos of the world, right? Like working a job and writing books and replying to emails and all that stuff. But I was also consuming a lot of knowledge. And that also leads to a cluttering of the mind. So I used to read a lot, always been this drive for self-improvement. And then in the sabbatical, the conscious choice was no Kindles, no phones. I just took 2 books with me and I just kept rereading them through the whole year.
Oh, wow. That would have been the most difficult thing.
Indeed, because I think there is a chaos that comes also from this idea of constantly wanting to learn, which is also like a chaos in your mind. So I wanted to even let go of that idea that there is a learning that has to happen.
Wow, that would kill me.
Yes, I know. And then again, the third choice was also tough, but again, we made a choice of what we called willful poverty, because what I was seeing was that my language in New York had become very alien to me because it was very comfort based. So I would say things like, I love Whole Foods and I love Sri Lankan cuisine and there was too many preferences. And I was becoming someone I didn't want to be, I wouldn't call myself materially attached because it was not like I want money or this or that, but there were too many preferences and attachments. And the third idea in the sabbatical was complete willful poverty, which was again hard. So that's why we spent in 4 months that we spent in yoga teachers training in India. We chose an ashram right in the middle of a forest. And then we lived in the Himalayas for 2 months in very spare living, we were sleeping on the floor of an ashram, taking only cold baths because that was all there was in the Himalayas. And we were for 4 months, we were just strip yourself of everything that you think you need. And just live in complete willful poverty. Again, to gain back perspective on what it means to be successful and happy. And again, I think it was a tough principle, but it was very we kind of just practiced it every day, that we would just not choose any, and would have no preferences for a year almost, accept what came.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And the harder it was almost the better in a way,
So I want to ask you on that, a really tough question, I think, to answer, which is, during that time, would you describe yourself as having been happy?
It's an excellent question. I think the relationship with happiness changed a little, if I may. So during that time, I think there was more silence than happiness is the right word, because I think what started to happen was, I used to meditate before, but what I was doing before was almost preparing to meditate. But in the sabbatical, I truly meditated in terms of starting to realize the arising and passing of thoughts. So this idea, in silence, you cut a little bit of the action-reaction cycle. Right. So what truly happens in everyday life is that some action happens and you react to it. So So in a situation like that, you are I'm sleeping on a cold floor, and you are immediately reacting that that's not comfortable. What started to happen was that this action reaction cycle broke, in which there was this action of sleeping on the floor. And then the reaction was, I'm sleeping on the floor, not whether I'm happy or unhappy or uncomfortable. And I think that was very good for me because there was a lot of silence in that. And I would say you could call it happiness in its own way, because there was no thought of judging whether that thing was happy or making me unhappy, Wow. So it's a little complicated.
No, but that's an incredible, incredible thing, is to experience emotions and thoughts as an observer and then decide. I think the power there is to decide, well, right now I'm feeling enjoyment over the sun hitting my face. And you can decide, yes, I will choose to become enveloped with that. Or right now I'm sleeping on a hard floor and I'm just going to experience that without getting into it.
Yep, exactly.
Karan, I want to hit on the meditation thing again, because as you know, we're a big advocate of meditation here, and we've talked about it a lot on the show. But I think a lot of the wisdom there bears repeating. So what skills or tools or improvements did this intensive period of meditation give you?
The biggest thing that happened, Jonathan, was I realized that my meditation before that was not truly meditation. It was preparing to meditate. So in a way, like when we think of meditation in the Yoga Sutras or the Dhammapada or the Buddhist and yogic text, we think of a little bit of a ladder. Like at the foundation of it is like the morality practices like self-help, gratitude journals. All that is basically preparing you to be at some ease with yourself. Then you move to more concentration-based approaches in which you are focusing on the breath or focusing on the mantra or all of that stuff. And again, you're not still meditating. You are teaching your mind a level of stability. And then meditation truly is the act of just knowing the nature of reality as it is. And in the process of knowing, you end up dissolving your sense of a concrete self. So it's almost like I felt like the meditation that I was doing before was building my sense of self, which isn't true meditation. And like when you're in true meditation, your sense of self is dissolved completely in a way, because you start realizing that all you are is a constant active stream of thoughts and ideas and fluctuations of thoughts and idea, and there is no concrete sense of you at all.
Absolutely, yeah.
So for me, that was like a bit of an insight in the journey, was that I was doing a lot of concentration-based practices before. I was focusing on my breath. And all of that stuff was like almost giving me a level of stability that required to then shatter all sense of self. Like I think that's where my meditation evolved a lot to insight and mindfulness-based practices. But I think what's happening in the West a little bit is that we are rushing towards awareness-based practices, or just like being and observing without having the requisite stability that it requires to reach those practices, right? So a lot of things are getting merged together, like practicing gratitude and self-help and all that stuff is getting merged with. Those are almost antithetical because they're building your sense of self versus dissolving it. And so I think I was able to just see a little bit of a distinction between meditation versus preparing to meditate, if you will.
Yeah, I definitely sense in that second step, I recognize a lot of my own meditative practice where I'm at the point where I can begin to observe thoughts. I can return myself to the breath. You know, I've been meditating under a year now habitually.
Wonderful.
I mean, how did you and how does one get from that second point to that third point where we're dissolving self? How do we break out of the preparing to meditate and actually begin truly meditating?
I think it's a great question. What I've seen is that it happens organically. So what you can force is the concentration-based approach in which you can focus on the breath or an image or a mantra. That's something that you can consciously, willfully train your mind to do, right? And which is very logical, is that you're training your mind to focus on one object for a period of time, which we call dharana in Sanskrit, or dhyana, which is like concentrated attention. That is what you can force. And after that, what happens is that it takes over. So I never tried to do any mindfulness-based meditation or insight-based meditation. It just happened to me. So I think when my thoughts reached a certain level of stability, I was able to see the nature of thought, if you will. But I couldn't force myself to do that, if you will. Like I think you have to force yourself to do the morality practices, which is gratitude journals and all that stuff. You have to force yourself to do concentration-based meditation, to sit for 30 minutes or 45 minutes and just focus on one object, whether it's your breath or an image. And after that, you just have to let it happen to you. Like let that idea of you've reached a certain level of stability in your mind in which you'll start seeing the nature of thought, and you'll just start noting that now I'm feeling this, now I'm feeling that. In the act of noting and labeling what you're feeling, that thought disappears. And I think that just happens to you almost.
Right. You know, and I think the beauty of meditation is that, especially for goal-oriented people like you and I, and people who want to race to the finish line, there's no racing to the finish line. It's putting in the hours and slowly reaping the benefits. I mean, 3 or 4 months ago, I don't think I could have put my finger on the benefits. And only in the last couple of months have I started to say, wait a minute, I'm calmer than I should be in this situation. So Karan, what is your meditation and yoga practice? How much do you do per day? And also at the same time, I noticed on your website that you do offer resources for people just starting with meditation. So how should they go about, and what should their daily practice be?
Yeah, absolutely. My meditation practice now is essentially two things. So one, I definitely meditate before I sleep in the night. So I might be up till 2 or 3 in the morning working on something because I get very like into something and I'm like very focused on it and I enjoy, like I get completely dissolved in the moment of working on it. But before I hit the bed, no matter how late it is, I always make it a point to spend 30 minutes willfully just observing, like closing my eyes, sitting and observing the thoughts arise and disappear. Because without that, I feel like I have a very, like I sleep, but it's a very vivid sleep. There is a lot of dreams and there is a lot of restlessness in the sleep. But when I meditate, it's almost like I just completely am completely thoughtless in my sleep, and it's a very deep, restful sleep. So I definitely meditate in the night. In the morning, what started to happen is that because I have like 2 babies, one is 18 months old and one is like a month old, You don't have that rhythm. You're just on somebody else's clock, which is also wonderful in its own way, but you're on someone else's clock. So I don't have this very rigid practice in the morning that I'm able to carve out. But what I do is I try to kind of like just have this choiceless awareness idea throughout the day in which I'm noting and labeling things. Like I'm trying to break the action-reaction cycle through the living of the day. Whenever something happens that agitates me or makes me even happy, I just note that that's happening. And I think that's my meditation practice through the day. And so that's been very powerful. It's just I note and label all the time. Like if some, and that kind of breaks the reaction of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And for people who are just starting meditation, as I mentioned, the website, I think the best way to start is concentration-based approaches, which is for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the night. Just choose an external object, whether it's your breath or if it's like an image that means something to you. Like, for example, a friend of mine is a musician and he's never gotten into this idea of a breath meditation, but he focuses on his guitar. For 30 minutes of his time, he closes his eyes and just focuses on the image of a guitar. And I think that kind of trains his mind to become one-pointed and stable in a very intuitive way that appeals to him. So I recommend just training yourself to get a level of stability by focusing on an external object, whether it's your breath or an image or even a mantra. And that's, I think, the best way to begin. Yeah.
Yeah, 30 minutes is quite challenging. I used to try and do 20 minutes in the morning. And eventually what I did is I realized that was creating so much psychological resistance that now I just sit for as long as it's enjoyable. And that was something that Chris Bailey said in one of our episodes with him. And it's completely changed my resistance every morning because I know if I sit, I can sit for 1 minute or I can sit for 30 minutes and I don't feel that pressure.
That's amazing. That's a good thought. Yeah.
I haven't missed a day in, I think, 4 months. So something's working well. I definitely benefit from these episodes as much as our audience does.
Great streak. Yeah.
Yeah. Karan, tell me about the Vipassana retreat that you did. I know a lot of folks, especially in the West, are doing these. A lot of people here in Israel are doing these retreats. Yeah. And I have to admit, it actually sounds absolutely terrifying to me. So how was it? What was it? And is this something that you would recommend?
Yes. And I'm a little bit of a crazy person in that way because I did 3 of them over a 2-month cycle. So That's like about 30 days. And just so for people who don't know, Vipassana is a 10-day silent retreat, which is very rigorous. It starts from 4 o'clock in the morning and goes on till about 10 in the night. So that's almost about 18 hours of meditation a day with small breaks in between for breakfast, lunch. But the breaks, I think in total are about 2 hours. So it's almost like for 16 hours, you are just sitting and meditating in a guided fashion. So there is somebody guiding you and it's not just all do it on your own.
Okay.
So that's the cycle of a 10-day meditation retreat. The foundation of it is brilliant, is that it's all compassion in the sense that those 10 days are completely paid for. So you don't pay for anything, food, lodging, etc. It's all based on people who've experienced it before donating for the next person in the cycle, if you will, right? So the whole organization is completely set up on the principle of compassion. And I think that's a very beautiful thing because what happens as a result is that when you're in this 10-day silent retreat, which is very rigorous, you come like a bit of a monk, right? Since you've not paid for anything at all, you're just there because of people's generosity. You are a monk with a begging bowl, essentially. You just have to take the offerings that are given to you. So you don't complain about, I don't like how big this hall is and there are 60 people and I don't like the fact that I'm meditating with people who are making noises when they are like meditating or like burping or whatever or snoring. Like you just have to embrace the fact that you are a bit of a beggar here. Like you've just come here and you're going to take the offering that's given to you. And I think that relaxes a lot of resistance to things and you truly want to learn as a result of that. But having said that, it is very intense and there are moments, and especially the 2nd and the 6th day, are moments that you want to throw in the towel and leave, right? Because you're like, this is not working, this is not right for me. And then your mind is never more chaotic than in this period where you're forced to just observe it. And kind of part of also the greatness of the retreat is that you are asked to not do anything else, not read, not exercise, just meditate. So if you're again used to cluttering, or not cluttering exactly, but you're used to reading a lot or like exercising, things that you enjoy doing, you're completely asked to strip yourself of that also. So all you're doing is meditating, and then you start seeing, you just can't deal with your mind. And like on the 2nd day, you want to just be like, this is not right for me and give up. But once you survive through that, I think it just it's a beautiful experience. And then like I did like 3 of them in almost like a 2-month cycle, and some part of me just kind of permanently reset as a result of doing those, you know?
Yeah. So how have you and your mindset changed since doing these retreats?
I think the starting of it is like, that's why when I know a meditation practice is working, is that the starting point of it is very physical. Things that should start changing are your sleep should become extremely deep and dreamless almost, because sleep changes. Your diet changes. So I never tried to consciously change my diet or lose weight at all. But what I saw after Vipassana was that I lost 20 pounds within 6 months, right? Without trying at all.
Wow.
Like I was quite happy with my weight. But what happened was that, as I said, the action-reaction cycle breaks, right? So you become just minutely, a little bit more aware that I'm having chocolate and chips because I like the taste of it, not because it's of any value. So you just note that I'm going to enjoy the pleasure of it, which is going to last a minute. And it's all very unconscious. And so all these things are not very conscious. And as a result, you just start making better, call it dietary choices. Now, for me, what happened was that and not that I'm recommending that, but I did become a vegetarian and I quit alcohol almost immediately after this 2 months without trying to, or without even having a very willful stance about it. It was just that I was very aware now that if I had like 2 pegs of whiskey at the end of the night, I was very conscious that would lead to sluggishness in my thoughts. So I was able to observe that versus become a part of it. Like, otherwise you just become a part of it and have regret the next day. I was just observing that now I'm becoming sluggish in my thinking. So that just led to a lot of like physical changes first. Sleep changed, diet changed, dreams disappeared. And then I hate to say it, but like I was always reasonably good at math. Like I've been an engineer, quite analytical, but I could calculate things in a way I couldn't believe. So I know it sounds very funny, but like concentration improves and you can just see the benefit of it in a very physical way. Like I would be sitting in work and I would be able to calculate things much faster than ever before. Like you could put 2 numbers together in my head very fast. And I just saw like those kind of things started to happen. So it was very physical first. And then I guess once you start noticing the physical changes, the more intangible changes are a little hard to note, but they start to happen, right? Like what I see is that you're a little bit less judgmental. Like you're not judging all the time. And then the other funny thing is that coincidences happen a lot. That's what I've seen with meditators is that they start to have a lot of coincidences in their life because like it sounds very metaphysical, but it's actually very physical, is that you've slowed down just a tad, right? So as a result, you're not rushing past every encounter. And when people start talking to you, you start to connect some dots from before. Mm-hmm. So you start to meet people that you wanted to meet and they suddenly start appearing in your life. And that's all because like you just slowed down just a tad in racing past things and activities. So I think so stuff like that, like it's all very physical are the changes. And then hopefully you become more compassionate and stuff. But those are harder to measure, right? Like you don't know how compassionate you are in a way. People start noting that around you.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that. I've definitely had people comment as well. And I think for me, the first thing that I've started to notice that kind of has encouraged me on the meditation is exactly that. I'm so much more aware, not just of my emotions, but the pieces all seem to fit together a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly.
So you came out of this experience, this 1-year experience, you came back and you must have found what you were looking for because you're about to publish your 3rd book, if I'm not mistaken, The Yoga of Max's Discontent. Tell us about that book. Tell us, who is Max and why is he discontented?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so the book is actually my first worldwide release. So Random House publishes it in May worldwide. And the story is about an investment banker who becomes a yogi in the Himalayas. And it sounds a little more like an alchemisty thing, but it's actually not. It's really a novel in its corest form. It's an adventure and a thriller through India with the transformation that happens. But at its core, it's like a fast-paced adventure story and not like some self-help book. I just follow the character through his journey of going from hidden night markets to hidden ashrams and up in the caves in the Himalayas. So it's kind of a very fast-paced adventure. His discontent is an interesting question because part of what happened to me, and I think which kind of sparked a little bit of his discontent in the novel, is this idea that has become very real for me that we're all kind of chasing the infinite in a finite world. And I think that's the root of his discontent, to answer your question. We know the materialism of it, right? Like we know that like houses and cars are not going to be like, are not going to satisfy our hunger. I think every rational person realizes that soon enough. But I think there is also an emotional materialism in terms of I guess, chasing growth and friendship and thoughts and ideas. And I think you start realizing after a while that there is a very infinite cycle of chasing all the time. And I think the act of chasing the infinite in a finite world is a root of his discontent, and realizing that and then kind of choosing to fill that with the infinite is what his discontent is about, if that starts to make a little sense.
Yeah.
But obviously the novel is not very philosophical, it's very physical.
That's a huge point, though, about this idea of emotional materialism and chasing.
Yeah.
We all know not to chase the material, but I definitely see a little bit of myself in that.
Right. And I think that's been good to observe. So in the Yoga Sutras, there's a beautiful metaphor about man's journey, if you will, which is, it's like, or even the journey of life overall is like an eagle who flaps its wings high and then brings the wings down. So there is a stage of life which is completely evolution, in which you just flap your wings high, if you will, like you're chasing every kind of experience and growth, and like you're just expanding your horizons in its biggest way possible. But then there comes a natural progression in life that you have to bring your wings down, if you will. You feel that sense of reality that nothing in the finite world is complete, and there has to be something infinite that I find within myself. And that's the phase of bringing your wings down. I think a lot of the book is kind of based on the realization of both phases happening, kind of crazy growth and then crazy growth within, if you will.
Fantastic. I'm excited to read it. And when does it come out?
It's on May 3rd. May 3rd is the worldwide release. Yeah.
Excellent. Karan, I'm sure a lot of people in the audience probably say to themselves, you had this successful career before writing and being an executive. They probably think, I could never take a sabbatical like that for 1 year. What would you want to say to those folks?
I would say that you can, but I would say start building the muscle. And I think the best way to start building the muscle is to take deeper, more meaningful vacations, which means I think what I'm seeing is that people work very hard and then they go to a resort on the beach. And what they're doing is that they're taking a physical vacation, but I would say take mental vacations, which means choose vacations that involve the mind completely. What I mean by that is try to strip yourself of all comfort, for example. Like a 10-day vacation, climbing the Kilimanjaro or something. Like, it doesn't require any technical skills. Anybody can go and climb Kilimanjaro. But in those 10 days, you'll be pushed to your limits in which your mind will dissolve completely because you're so into the act of climbing a mountain. Or take the 10-day Vipassana retreat. Again, very accessible, free. You can take a 10-day vacation. So vacations that are actually, or creation vacations in which you take 10 days to live in an artist retreat and just come up with an idea and start writing. So I think you start taking vacations that are stripping yourself of everything that you know, and then slowly that muscle starts going from 10 days to 1 month to 1 year. Because I think you just become much more comfortable with this idea of what you need to be comfortable, if you will. So I would say start building the muscle with meaningful 10-day vacations instead of going to a resort on the beach.
I think that's a fantastic piece of homework and a fantastic assignment to give to the audience.
Yeah.
Karan, what books besides your own have you given the most as gifts?
2 books that come to my mind are Mindfulness by Joseph Goldstein. Mm-hmm. And the second one is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. There are many translations of that. Iyengar's translation is very good. And the reason I'm kind of mentioning those 2 books, again, they sound very like mystical and Eastern traditions are not. But there are 2 reasons that I recommend it. One, they are very practical guides to life from very ancient traditions, and some things have endured over centuries of being human. And I think they kind of capture that truths in very, very practical ways. So I think that's the one reason I recommend them. But the second reason is, I think much of what, and your show is very exceptional that way, but much of what's happened to, I think, mindfulness in the West it's become very vibrations and chakras and energy fields, and it's become very foo-foo in a way. And I think these books are very hardcore. Like, they don't flinch from the harsh realities of the incompleteness of the human experience. I like the books that acknowledge first the incompleteness of the experience and then try to solve it, versus ignore that by like becoming grateful and practicing gratitude and all. Like, they just acknowledge the incompleteness of the human experience first. And I think that's why I recommend those, because a deeper spiritual inquiry can first begin by acknowledging the limitations of what is possible in the human experience. So I think I like them for that.
When you say incompleteness of the human experience, you're talking about those who live in sorrow. You're talking about kind of the standard obsession with living in the future. What does that mean, incompleteness of the human experience?
In a way that, like what I was mentioning before, that like in the past, like when you think of the Buddha or Mahavira or like the spiritual seekers of the past were typically kings, right? Because they were kings who had seen that everything in the finite world they had accomplished, and yet they were not happy. And they realized that there is some deeper truth within that would lead to that complete happiness. So I mean, like the incompleteness of the human experience without a deep, soulful practice, your human experience in terms of, as I said, the physical and emotional materialism is always incomplete. So I think these books acknowledge that and start talking about why that happens and deconstruct that a little.
I love that.
Yeah.
Karan, if people want to learn more about you, I know your book is coming out in May, The Yoga of Max's Discontent. Where can they get engaged with you and learn more?
I blog on karanbajaj.com, my website. It also has a free meditation video course. Like I give very practical, honest tips on meditation and also deepening your creativity and writing with exceptionalism. So I think between writing and creativity, I give a lot of tips on the blog. I think that's the best place to start.
That's fantastic. And I think we should probably do another episode on writing and creativity as well. I think that would be really cool. One last question I want to ask, and we'll close on this question. If people take away one lesson from this episode and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope that lesson would be?
Beyond obviously buying my book. No, so Yeah. The one lesson I would say is to strip yourself of comfort very often. I think the attachment to comfort leads to very limiting choices. So ever so often, every 3 months, take a week off to live with very little.
Practice poverty.
Willful poverty. Strip yourself of comfort and come closer to what truly matters, because that will liberate you to make the right choices for yourself.
That is a fantastic note to end on. Mr. Karan Bajaj, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I'm so glad that we got to connect, and I hope we will keep in touch.
We will. Jonathan, it's an honor. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really, really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody, or you are somebody, or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.